Matthews' book, Anacara, a number of times. It's just I just love this book. Anyway, so you're getting it again today as we're talking about clarity of vision. It says, many of us have made our world so familiar that we do not see it anymore. An interesting question to ask yourself at night is, what did I really see this day? You could be surprised at what you did not see. Maybe your eyes were unconditioned reflexes operating all day without any real mindfulness or recognition while you looked out from yourself. You never gazed or really attended to anything. The human eye is always selecting what it wants to see and also evading what it does not want to see. It's a startling truth that how you see and what you see determine how and who you will be. An interesting way of beginning to do some interior work is to explore your particular style of seeing. Ask yourself, what way do I behold the world?
Our reading today is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. They came to Jericho. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with the disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus ben Timaeus was sitting at the side of the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout and to say, "Heir of David, Jesus, have pity on me." Many people scolded him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the louder, "Heir of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him here." So they called the blind man. "Don't be afraid," they said. "Get up, Jesus is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, Bartimaeus jumped up and went to Jesus. Then Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Rabboni," the man said, "I want to see." Jesus replied, "Go, your faith has saved you." And immediately Bartimaeus received the gift of sight and began to follow Jesus along the road. Amen.
Would you pray with me? Gracious Spirit, there is so much in this world to see, so much to experience, so much to know. Open our eyes, open our minds, open our thoughts to all of it, that we might know more deeply and see more clearly. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your wisdom and your insight. Amen. So, if Jesus asked you today, what can I do for you? What would you say? I wonder what we would ask for ourselves, personally. You know, aside from perhaps Don, I don't think any of us would ask to see, because we all have our eyesight. And yet I wonder how much of us actually see clearly. And I'm not talking about, having cataracts or having astigmatism or needing glasses or whatever. I'm talking about really seeing the world around us and within us. I wonder how much of our vision is clouded by our preconceived notions and our judgments and our ego and our emotions. John O'Donohue really challenges us to ask ourselves each night, what did I see today? And what didn't I see today? Which is a really hard thing to answer because we didn't didn't you see today? Well, I don't know, because I didn't see any hats, right? But then what is it that, in what way do we behold the world? Those first two questions, what did I see, what didn't I see, are really about actually physically seeing. Some of seeing clearly is about our physical eyesight. Do we go through the world with blinders on, so absorbed and engrossed in what we're doing and what we're thinking that we get from our house to the grocery store and have no clue how we got there? Do we miss the things that go around us? Oh, do you notice so-and-so looked really sad today? No, I didn't see that at all. What do we see and what don't we see? Sometimes has to do with physical seeing. Our little exercise we did with counting the tosses of the ball and not seeing Mike with the hats on. I sort of stole from an exercise called the invisible gorilla. I don't know if anybody's heard of the invisible gorilla, but there are two teams of three. 3 are in white shirts and 3 are in black shirts, and they're videotaped, and each team has a basketball, and they're tossing the ball to each other while they're kind of weaving in and out of each other. And the viewer is asked to count how many passes the white threesome make to each other. And while that's happening, a gorilla walks into the middle of the screen, pounds on its chest, and walks off. Being on screen for 9 full seconds. When Harvard did this study, it seems like a no-brainer, right? We're all going to see the gorilla in the middle of the screen. But when Harvard did the study, half of the people who did that experiment didn't see the gorilla. What do we see? And what don't we see in life? A friend of mine was talking this week about how he and another one of his church leaders took a whole group of youth to the theater one night. And he was down in the theater district, and they had to park a couple blocks away and walk to the theater. And sadly, in that town, there were a number of homeless people, and those homeless people had determined that was a really lucrative spot to sit because there was a lot of high traffic. And so the youth are in front of them, and they're walking to the theater, and the woman with Bill she kind of takes his arm and says, just hold back and watch for a second. And they watch the youth weave in and out among the homeless, stepping over them, watching their phones the whole time until they got to the theater. Well, they got back in the bus afterwards, and they said to the youth, so what did you think about those homeless people? Blank stares. What homeless people? What do we see and what don't we see? Are even those stories enough for us to reconsider what we might answer to Jesus today? Would we ask, I want to see what I'm missing in life. So the third question that John O'Donohue raised was, in what way do we behold the world? Which essentially asks us, what are the filters that we're seeing the world through? Because the way we see the world affects who we are. We all know the phrase and have been asked the question, are you a person whose glass is half full or half empty? How many of you would be half full people? Okay, so by and large, you see the world more optimistically, with a more positive spin on things. And if you're a glass half full, or a glass half empty person, then perhaps you're a little more jaded, a little more cynical, see the world a little more negatively off the bat. Just two different perspectives on the same things, but affects who you are. Those are the kinds of filters. That's how we behold the world. That's one example. What's another? What other ways do we behold the world? The glass is refillable. Okay, there's another way to look at the world. Outside of the glass metaphor, how else what people do you know, and how do they behold the world? What filters Always negative. Or judgmental. Joyful. Sad. To be scared. John? Social media, that's their view of the world, which is an interesting filter in and of itself. And depending on which social media and who your friends are, you have a different filter. What else?
Some people see it as all bad with some good sprinkled throughout, and others see it as all good with some bad sprinkled.
Right, so either you see it immediately as all bad with just a few points of light, or it's all good with just a little bit of bad. Some people are angry. Some people feel inferior. Some people feel entitled. There's all kinds of filters that we see the world through. And so the question becomes, how do I personally behold the world? What's the filter that I'm wearing? And do I even have any clue what it might be? Sometimes we need guides, other people to help us to see what our own perspective is. So let me tell you two stories. Rachel Raymond, who wrote My Grandfather's Blessings, tells two stories. And one is about a woman named Patricia. So Dr. Raymond's been seeing Patricia for 6 months and listening to her sort of constant litany of fears. And one day she says to Patricia, she said, you know, for the next 4 weeks, I want you to go through your life, but you are not allowed to be afraid. She said, basically, what I've heard over the last 6 months is just you being afraid about everything. That's your first reaction to everything. And when someone's first reaction to all things is the same, it's suspect. She said, I'm not convinced that fear is all there is for you. Well, Patricia got very upset. She's like, she said, you don't see me at all. You don't understand me at all. In fact, you have absolutely no compassion. Dr. Raymond says, no, on the contrary, I think after all of these months, I do see you. I think your fear has been getting in the way of who you really are. So very reluctantly, Patricia agreed to the experiment. And for the next 4 weeks, she was to watch her reactions to things that happened to her. And when she saw that her first reaction was fear, she was to take a step back, understand that that was only her first response, and to determine that if she were not allowed to be afraid, if she did not feel fear, what would be her second response? And at first she was very discouraged because she found that she felt afraid a lot. And then as time went by, and she paid attention to that fear and started realizing how often she felt afraid, she started to question for the first time if that wasn't simply an ingrained habit that she'd sort of, grew into over years and years, been conditioned to, in part by a mother who was afraid of many, many things. And so she started to really take a look at that and ask herself, am I really afraid right now? And very often she was surprised to find that the answer was no. She wasn't really afraid. It was just a knee-jerk reaction. And so she was able to live more fully by finally seeing herself more clearly and being intentional about seeing life more clearly. Proust has a quote that basically says, the voyage of discovery is not about seeing new vistas, but having new eyes. So one more story. This is a story about a man named Josh, who was a very successful cancer surgeon. He came to see Dr. Raymond because he was depressed. He had become disillusioned and very cynical. And he was thinking about tossing it all in, early retirement. He said he didn't even have the energy to get up in the mornings. He said, I see the same problems every day. I see the same illness every day. I don't care anymore. I just want a new life. And she said, well, before we do that, I'd like to ask you to try something. So every night, at the end of your day, I want you to review your life. Spend 15 minutes going to review your day. Spend 15 minutes looking back on your day and ask yourself 3 questions. And journal the answers. And the 3 questions are, what surprised you today? What touched and moved you today? And what inspired you today? What surprised, moved, and inspired you? And he was reluctant to do this. She said the idea isn't to write a novel. It's just jot down a few words. The whole intent is to have a new perspective on your day. And he kind of hemmed and hawed about it. She said, well, it's cheaper than Prozac. So he agreed to give it a shot. After 3 days, he called her back and he was really irritable and he said, Rachel, I've tried this for 3 nights and every time I come up with the same answer. Nothing, nothing, and nothing. He said, I really don't like to fail at things. Is there a trick to this? And she kind of chuckled and said, well, maybe, Josh, you're looking at your life in the same old ways. Why don't you try looking at it from the viewpoint of a novelist or a journalist or maybe even a poet? Hey, I said, right. Yeah, give that a shot. But she didn't hear back from him. And they met periodically, but over the next 6 weeks, he never said anything about that again. Yet he seemed to be getting better. Finally, he came in and he brought this little brown book with him. And he started to talk about why he really thought he was improving. He said, to begin with, when he was doing that exercise, the only thing that surprised him was when the cancer shrunk a millimeter or 2. And the only thing that inspired him was when a new experimental drug, succeeded and gave somebody another chance at life. But then as he started going a little more deeper, he started to experience people's lives in a different way. And he started to see the strength that people had to overcome some really difficult treatments, or the courage they had to, give up a part of their body because they valued their life so greatly. He saw their strength and their courage, and it started to move him and to change him. He said at the beginning, he could only see those things looking back. He said it was like being in a fairy tale where you could only really see what happened to you in retrospect. But then the gap started to close between the time he experienced it and the time he recognized it. And when he finally got to a point that he recognized it when it happened, he saw it when that surprise or that inspiration or that touching moment happened, he said that's when things really began to change for him. And he thought that was so because that's when his attitude, he thought, began to change. That's when he really began to see people. And he said once his attitude began to change, he said people must have sensed it or noticed it or something because their attitude began to change. And as he was touched by their stories and noticed what was going on, he started to reflect that back to them. The first time it happened, he said he had a 38-year-old woman who was in his office. She'd had ovarian cancer, and she'd had radical abdominal surgery for the cancer, and then undergone excruciating chemotherapy for it. But she sat there in his office with her 4-year-old on her lap and her 6-year-old leaning up against her chair. And he said it was as if for the first time ever he really saw her. And he saw those kids who were, bright and shiny and hairbrushed and clean clothes and clearly happy and well-loved. And after they talked about the treatment, he looked at her and he said, I can see that you are a wonderful mother. And that your children give you a lot of strength. He said, I think that, with the power of that love and the strength that you have for your children, that this will help you eventually to heal. And he said for the first time ever, she smiled at him. She'd never seen her smile before, and she said, thank you. That really means a lot to me. And with that encouragement, he started doing that with other patients. He started asking questions that the medical profession doesn't teach us to ask. Say, what's sustaining you through this treatment? Where are you getting the strength to go through this? And as he heard the answers, he realized that they were answers that he needed to hear for himself in his own life, not because he was going through cancer, but because he had all of these other struggles about his profession and his life. And he was touched repeatedly by that. He'd always been a very successful, very well sought out surgeon whose results, whose data results were stupendous. Said, but now for the first time, people were thanking him for their surgery and giving him gifts. And he brought out a brand new stethoscope that somebody had given him, shiny and with his name engraved on it. And talked about how much that had moved him. And Dr. Raymond looked at him and said, well, Josh, what do you do with that? And he looked a little puzzled and paused for a minute, and they said, I listen to hearts, Rachel. I listen to hearts. We have a lot of ways that we see life. But I don't know that we always see life in such a way that we see hearts. Or give of our own hearts. And that's the clarity of vision that we seek. And that's the clarity of vision that I think the Spirit can help us with. And maybe our answer to Jesus, if he were to ask it today, should be, yes, I want to see. Not just what's outside of me, but what's within me. And I want to be able to see what's in other people. I want to really be touched and moved by the world, inspired by the world, and surprised by the world. And that takes intention on our part, a conscious decision to walk with our eyes open. Maybe we even have to say, God, I want to see. Or your higher power, or your divine essence, or the ground of your being, or however you understand that thing that connects us all so that we can see with oneness and clarity what's going on around us. I think the more that we're connected to that Spirit, the more we're connected to one another, the more we walk through life, seeing clearly with love and with compassion, with joy, with hope, the more fully we live life, and the more fully we serve the Spirit.